So, what should kids be learning in school? The answer you get from the traditional system is things like history, geography, English, math. So, these are academic disciplines, right? Now, the most watched TED video today is by Sir Ken Robinson, where he points out that academic disciplines are only relevant to academicians. We don't seem to realize that in the real world, the only people doing academics all day are university professors and researchers. Beyond basic math and language, these academics are not relevant to 99.9% of the professions out there. None of us are using calculus, trigonometry, balancing equations in our professional lives. In fact, I work with hundreds of architects and engineers, which are highly technical jobs, right? But I can bet you that not a single one of them will be able to solve a quadratic equation today because they have literally never had to do it in their professional lives. So, why are we spending thousands of hours in the schools of today teaching kids stuff that is completely irrelevant, that they'll never have to use, and that they won't even remember? The system kind of tricks you into thinking that academics is all there is for kids to learn. But of course, you know that academics is such a tiny part of the real world and that there is so much to learn once you start thinking beyond academics. But we trap our kids into this tiny box that's going to be irrelevant for 99.9% of them. Now, I know what you're thinking. Academics are the basics, right? Academics are the basics that everyone needs to know. Frankly, that's the only argument I've heard in favor of academics, but there's a bunch of reasons why it doesn't make any sense. First of all, if these are really the basics, then how come nobody ever uses them in the real world? Like, at all. Second, you can argue that there are other things which are much more basic in today's world, like coding, making presentations, writing emails, even making videos or websites. Third, if it's really so basic, then the children will learn it anyway, right? Why are we so worried about it? Because if you think about the real basics in everyday life, like using a phone or a computer or traveling from place to place, did the kids need classes to learn any of this? No, they just figure it out because it's actually essential to life. We don't need to trap our kids in a building for 15 years to teach them things that are basic. So I hope you can see that this whole basics argument completely falls apart even if you try to dig into it a little bit. It's just a superficial justification for this horrible system of education. There is no reason why the system limits itself to academics, but we are stuck inside this box and we are not able to think outside that box. Honestly, I was myself stuck in this box and it took me a long time to realize that. When I started working on creating a school, for the first 5 years, I wasn't able to think beyond academics. I knew I wanted to completely change the system, but I kept thinking about how to do this academics thing better. How to make it more student driven and autonomous, and how to use technology. But then when I spoke to the founders of Big Picture, they asked me the question, why academics? And it hit me really, really hard because I realized that I had never questioned that before. And I started to realize that there's something really wrong about this academics thing. But hang on, what else are you going to do with kids in a school? And they said, have you heard about this thing called the real world? Let's take a few steps back. What is the purpose of education? In my mind, it's always been very clear it's to prepare kids for the real world. But then, why doesn't school look anything like the real world? People in the real world aren't just reading books all day. They aren't just putting all their effort into some meaningless exam. No, they spend most of their time creating something or working with other people to deliver a product or service. They spend most of their time creating value for other people. And the kind of learning that leads to success in the real world is so different from the kind of learning that's happening in the schools of today. If you think about what matters most in the real world, it's learning by doing. It's on the job experience. Nobody cares how many books you've read or how well you can ace some exam. The only thing that matters is what can you actually do? What can you produce? Or what roles can you play in an organization? And Big Picture focuses entirely on this kind of learning, which is so different from academic learning. We're going to talk a lot about this kind of learning later in the series. For now, let's think about it as learning by doing. For example, if you want to learn how to cook, the best way is to actually cook, to try and produce an output again and again and again, trying to get better each time. If you want to learn how to code, you should try and code. and try to produce something. Maybe an app, a website, whatever it may be. If you put all your effort into just reading, that's not really going to get you anywhere, right? So that's really the difference. Big picture is about learning by doing. So the question is, what should kids be learning? Traditional schools are focused on academic learning, where you read a bunch of books and you give a bunch of exams. But big picture says that we need to shift from academic learning to real world learning. And when we say real world learning, we're talking about learning by doing. On the job learning, learning how to deliver a product or service, learning how to work in an organization. And by the way, that's what's seen on your resume, on your portfolio. This is how you get anywhere in the real world. Beyond your first job, nobody cares about your grades. They care about what you can do, what you can produce. So, why are we not focusing on that? We are making our kids spend 50,000 hours learning irrelevant academic stuff that they're going to forget the moment they give the exam. Now, what if they spend all that time producing and creating stuff? Don't you think that'd be a much better use of that time? Now, one big problem could be that we don't really know how to bring real world learning into our schools. And of course, that's what big picture is all about. For now, I'll just reinforce again that we're talking about the what should kids be learning in school? And big picture is trying to bring a big shift away from academic learning and towards real world learning. But how do you do that? The rest of the series is about the how. How should children be learning?